It is exactly 9 o'clock. Welcome back to the show, and a very, very big warm welcome to our Polokwane listeners on One Nation FM. We do hope you're going to enjoy the second half of the show this morning. Our first guest in this hour is Dr. Nazim Abrams. He is a healthcare practitioner specializing as a social worker. He runs the Lighthouse on the Horizon rehab facility, drug rehab facility in, I think it is Witpoortjie on the western in the western suburbs of Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum to you, Nazim. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah. Shukran. Thank you for having me again.
Always a pleasure. You're doing sterling work at the rehab center, and may you grow from strength to strength. It is the 16 days of activism of no violence against women and children. And of course, it will be ending this Saturday, I think it is. I've been talking about this issue, giving it as much traction as we possibly can. I decided to change the angle and look at this from a different point of view. We do know that violence is also perpetrated against boys and men, and very especially in marital relationships when things don't go right. Men can be the victims, and very especially in light of child access or issues around just fair and equitable access to the home, to the children, and to family matters. And therein comes something that you're involved in a very big way as well. I hope I'm correct. Fathers for Justice, Fierce, Fair, and Understanding. Talk to us about this, very especially being the 16 days of activism. And we're not saying that men are not to be held responsible and accountable if they have erred, but we are all saying don't take away their rights.
Absolutely. But firstly, Auntie Julie, I want to say shukran to you for changing your thought process around the subject, because very rarely are we heard as men. And you're absolutely correct in saying that I deal with this on a daily basis. So yes, the accountability is very real. And one needs to understand that one needs to take full accountability and responsibility for one's actions. But in what I'm seeing a lot, okay, and I haven't dealt directly with Fathers for Justice. I have been dealing, or I have dealt with them many years ago, and we kind of lost contact. But I hear and I understand, and the concern for me is that what about the man who has taken accountability for his actions and has rectified, or is in the process of rectifying himself and his actions? And through that process, he still finds himself being held accountable for in ways that is really unruly. Because if one thinks about it, a child has two parents. And despite what the one parent or any of the parents do or has done, there is that factor that one needs to always not forget, is that we can make tawbah, we can ask for forgiveness, we can do right. And the thing that I want to talk about is the young men that are going through a very, very, very concerning process when they are held away and kept away from their children, from their spouses, from the spouses, or from the mothers of those children. And purely out of spite, purely out of hurt, yes, and pain also, one needs to understand. And there's where the accountability lies. But where do we draw the line? And at which point do we draw the line? One needs to take into account that if a person is rectifying his wrongs and is taking accountability, then surely, and I'm not even talking about any entitlement. I'm merely, moving towards a fact that one person is taking full accountability and responsibility, and yet finds it very difficult for him to partake in the upbringing of his child or children.
Okay. Nazim, here's the issue, the very big burning issue. A lot of the times, fathers are not given access to their children because the situation is a domestic violence issue. And 90% of those issues stem from alcohol or drug abuse. We know that it changes it changes the behavior of the dependent person. They become very violent, they become unreasonable, they're not pleasant to be around. The then conditions are put in that, for example, and you're very, very aware of all of this because this is your daily work, that if you don't go and clean up your act, go into rehab, change your habits, change your behaviors, we will then reconsider access to the children or perhaps visitation rights. What is it doing to the addict or the dependent person? Because I understand we no longer, the politically correct word is not addicts, it is now dependent person. So what happens to his frame of mind in terms of doing a stint at rehab, attending NA meetings, having a sponsor, keeping as busy as he possibly can so that he doesn't fall back into the trap of addiction, and these very strict conditions of no access or visitation rights to the children. I'm wondering how
Yeah.
damaging is it for the person?
Look, first, I want to say that it is absolutely correct when we talk about the accountability, which is vast. Okay, so we see the fact that there is visitations is given or access is given, but it's given under supervision. And that I agree with completely, because one cannot go through a process and just expect everything to fall into place. It will take time. The healing process for you, for the recovering person, is in fact taking place. But what about the recovering person, the affected person? So we do understand that, and I understand that better than most. However, keeping the child away or not granting access at all or putting these strict measures into place certainly has a negative effect on the mind frame of the individual. It's very demotivating because part of the reason for change is because they want to right their wrongs and they want to do better and they want to be good fathers and good sons and even good husbands. And unfortunately, sometimes when we talk about marriages, they already fallen apart, and there's divorce is already in place or already has taken place. But I still believe that when those accesses are granted and the strict measures are put into place, it does have a negative effect on the individual, and it is very demotivating. However, fully understandable, and I do this in my counseling processes, that I help the dependable person to understand that that is still part of accountability. But I'd like to, we're talking about those that are not getting access at all, those that the affected parties has not seek help. They still going through their own pain, and because they're going through their own pain, they deal with the situation inadequately. By saying so is that they then deny complete access to said father, which I do believe is completely illegal and wrong, because if a person, and those conditions, rightfully, as you said earlier, those conditions are placed by the courts, where you will go and clean up your act, you will go through a rehabilitative process, you will go for regular testing, you could possibly have access to visitations facilitated by social workers, or by persons that the court would deem fit. But I'm more focused on or now I'm more talking about those that are completely denied access, and that has such a negative effect on the mind of the recovering person, because it's very demotivating, very.
Nazim, that is also gender-based violence in some form or the other, is it not? Denying
Absolutely.
access to the child or visitation rights to the child by the family, whether it was a domestic violence issue or not. that is a GBV in a different form. It's being played out and it's being used as punishment against the father.
Absolutely. You could not have said that more correct, because that is emotional blackmail, for one, to start off with, if you look at it from a psychological perspective, but it's also abuse. It's emotional abuse, because here's said person going through emotional and psychological treatments and going through psychiatric processes and psychological processes in order for him to rectify and retrain his brain, to retrain his mind, his thought process, so that he can live properly and do properly. And then finds himself then still being abused on the other hand, as much as he's trying, and not even trying, as much as he's doing. And this is, I've seen it, I've witnessed it, how it's had an adverse effect on recovering persons. And less being said, it's a huge part of the relapse process.
Sure.
It's a very a large part of the relapse process.
So mothers and families need to be cognizant of this issue, because it could make the person either not go into rehab at all or make them relapse. Because I guess the thinking then would be, what's the point? What's the point that I go and clean up my act if I'm not going to have access to my children? My final question, I wish I had more time with you, but my final question then to you is, how do you assist young fathers or fathers in, they may not necessarily spend a stint at your rehab center, but I also understand that you do work with them. There is an avenue open for them to get access or visitation right to the children. What are the processes that they have to go through? You spoke about drug testing as well. So talk to us about all of those issues.
So what we do is we obviously join hands with various child welfare institutes, and what we do is we then offer testing for them, in order for their processes to run smoothly. The processes are quite simple. An application is made with child welfare, an investigation is lodged, visits is then done on said homes in order to see whether the homes are suitable. Because remember, the most important factor here is the child. The child and the well-being of the child is number one. Um, not that they don't care much about mom or dad, but the most important factor is the well-being of the child, and that the what is in the best interest of the child. And that's why I say that, even from my perspective, through counseling processes, through the healing processes with those young dads that has been by me, or those that even hasn't been by me, we counsel, we put them through a counseling, or we counsel with them to help them understand the process, so that they can work with the system and not against the system. Because sometimes the guys don't understand as well, and because they don't understand, they have the sense of entitlement that I'm the father, nobody can take this right away from me. Absolutely correct. Nobody but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take that right away from you. But if you haven't done justice to the child and to your family, then obviously you are responsible and accountable. And we counsel through that to gear them up, to help them understand these processes, and for them to understand that there's a dire need to be able to go through this process, and it is part of the recovery process and part of the healing process. And that's how we help them through counseling. We then connect them to the proper institutes, child welfare institutes. We join hands with those social workers. We also assist with reports, psychosocial reports, if and when necessary. I even go to court at times, if at all necessary, and witness for said recovering people or young fathers. And I do that simply because I believe that they are entitled to a chance. And when I say entitled, I don't mean it in a negative sense. I mean it purely in a sense, and even on a spiritual level, they are entitled because they have made tawbah, they have asked forgiveness, and we believe as Muslims that when you ask for forgiveness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives. And you are not to repeat those mistakes. And as long as I see the young dads not being repetitive in their old habits, we go completely out of our way to be able to assist them in the best way possible, to ensure that they justice is brought down to them as well.
Nazim Abrams, Dr. Nazim Abrams, healthcare practitioner specializing as a social worker, and also runs the Lighthouse on the Horizon Drug Rehab Center here on the western suburbs of Johannesburg. Thank you indeed for giving us a different perspective on the issue of GBV. Very important indeed, and obviously it also gives hope to families and young fathers out there that if they do what is right, rehabilitate, make amends, go for regular counseling, testing, etc., they will and can have a meaningful relationship with their young children. Thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Shukran so much for having me.
Go well. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Okay, it is exactly 16 after 9 o'clock. And of course, we cross over to Zai Jadwat, our news correspondent standing by to bring us the news bulletin of the morning.